If you can do the job of a table, then you're a table. It doesn't matter what you're made out of. Today we're talking about one of the most popular, perhaps these days the most popular theory in the philosophy of mind, and that theory is functionalism. One of the earliest proponents of functionalism was Hilary Putnam. We actually read Putnam earlier in this course when he was attacking behaviorism. That was the whole reading about the super Spartans and all that sort of thing. Anyway, we did not read Putnam for today. Instead, we read a reading by someone named Adam Bradley. And Bradley is really just summarizing the kind of argument that Putnam originally made, except for Putnam's article is very difficult to read and difficult to understand. And so in an introductory level course like this, we read the much clearer exposition that we got from Bradley. Okay, but before we can get on to functionalism itself, let's just do a little bit of a recap, very, very fast recap of the history of the philosophy of mind, and this will sort of also be the history of this course up until this point. The first philosophical theory of mind that we talked about was the theory that was advocated by René Descartes in the 17th century, and that was dualism. As you remember, dualism was the theory that says that there's two kinds of stuff. There's dual, two. There's the mental stuff and the physical stuff, and those are just different, fundamentally different kinds of things in the universe. And, well, they're separate, and so you have a physical body, and then you have a mind. And the mind is not made up out of physical particles like the body. The mind is the kind of thing that thinks. And the body is the kind of thing that moves in space and makes contact with other physical bodies and that sort of thing. Then, you'll remember, we ran into a big problem for dualism. And that problem was presented by Princess Elizabeth, who was a contemporary of Descartes, and she wrote him letters and explained why, if the mind is an immaterial thing, then it seems impossible for that immaterial thing to cause events in the body. And that's a big problem because we normally think of our mental states, like, my desire to move my hand, as being able to cause physical events, like the movement of my hand. Okay, so we had a theory of mind, the dualist theory from Descartes, and then we had Princess Elizabeth's problem for that theory. Then it was time to move on to physicalism. Physicalism is the main alternative to dualism. It's the view that the mind is real, it's just some of the physical stuff in the universe. So the mind is made up of atoms, just like my hand is made up of atoms. But then the question is, okay, which atoms? Like, which parts of the physical universe are minds? And so far, we've talked about two theories that try to develop more specific versions of physicalism. The first one was behaviorism, right? That was the view that to be in a mental state was merely to exhibit a certain kind of behavior or be disposed to exhibit a certain kind of behavior. And then we had a problem for behaviorism, and that was the problem that Putnam presented. That was the super Spartans example. And so now we've got a version of physicalism and an objection to that, and we're going to need another version of physicalism, and the next version of physicalism that we talked about was the mind-brain identity theory. Okay, so this theory is actually the most important part of this recap. Like, if you mostly understood what I said up here, that's fine. But you really need to know what I mean by identity theory, or that's just a shortened nickname for the full name of the theory, which is the mind-brain identity theory. You really need to know what that is to understand what I'm talking about today, because what we're doing today is we're getting two things. We're getting an objection that goes here, an objection to the identity theory, and then we're getting the next version of physicalism. That goes down here, right? So we're doing double duty today. We're getting the objection to the theory from last time, and we're getting the next theory of mind, which is functionalism. So functionalism is going to go here. But before we can say what that is, let me just remind you what the identity theory is. And really, you should probably watch my previous video, and I'll put a link in the description to that or whatever, about the mind-brain identity theory. That theory says that the human mind, all of your thoughts and your hopes and your beliefs and your desires and your emotions and your sensations, all of that stuff, that's just some brain stuff. Being in pain, for example, that's a state of your mind, is just identical to having certain fibers in the brain, zapping each other at a certain rate and in a certain way. That's all that the mind is. The mind and the brain, or at least the mind and parts of the brain, are identical. They're the same thing. Okay, so now we're ready to start talking about the content that was in the reading for today. We're ready to get the objection to the identity theory. If you're going to understand this objection, then you need to understand what a functional kind is. What I've done here is I've written up a kind of definition of functional kind. This is the definition that we'll use in this course. A functional kind is a kind of thing that is defined in terms of its function or role or job, and not the kind of stuff that it happens to be made out of. We need an example to understand what's going on here. The example from the reading is a mousetrap. You've got mousetraps. Mousetraps have a job. They have a function. The function of a mousetrap is to trap mice. You've got different kinds of mousetraps, right? You've got the kind that's like a wood board on the bottom, and then you put like a piece of cheese there, or whatever, there's the cheese. And then there's like a piece of metal, and there's a spring or something. I don't really understand how it works, but it's made out of a wood block and some cheese and some metal, and when the mouse steps on there, the metal clamps down on the mouse. That's one kind of mousetrap. And then there are other kinds of mousetraps. There are other kinds that are just like cages. You know, there's a cage and there's a door in the cage, and then when the mouse goes in and they touch the cheese or the whatever else is in there, right, then the cage drops down, the door drops down, and they're locked in the cage. And then there's other kinds of mousetraps too, like there's the kind that's just like a sticky piece of paper or something and they get stuck on it. Those seem especially cruel to me. I mean, maybe all mousetraps are cruel. I don't know. I'm not endorsing the use of mousetraps in this video. It's just an example from the reading. Anyway, the point is this. In order to be a mousetrap, all you have to do is do the job. It doesn't matter what you're made out of. Are you made out of metal? Are you made out of wood and a little bit of metal? Are you made out of plastic? It doesn't matter. To be this kind, the kind mousetrap, to be of that kind, you just need to do the job. Another example is like a table, right? You know, you got a table. Here are the legs, and here's the top of the table. Tables have a function. The function is to place things on them and have those things not just like fall down and hit the ground. And you know, you're also supposed to be able to sit at a table or something like that. If you can do the job of a table, then you're a table. It doesn't matter what you're made out of. You can make tables out of plastic or wood or metal or glass or wicker or whatever. Because a table, like a mousetrap, is the kind of thing that's defined in terms of its function. It's the job that matters. One last example. I am the instructor of this course. The instructor is a role that I play, right? I have other roles. I'm also like a dad, and I don't know, a driver. I drive a car sometimes, and when I'm driving a car, the role that I'm playing is the role of a driver on the road. But in this context, I'm an instructor. To be the instructor of this course, all you have to do is have this function, you know, play this role, grade the papers and lead the classroom discussions and give the lectures and all that sort of stuff. Anything that does that fulfills this function, that does the job, is the instructor, right? It could be me or someone else or a super intelligent robot or an alien or whatever. Okay, so that's what a functional kind is. Notice though, not all kinds of stuff are functional kinds. So the example from the reading, I think, was water. But if we want another example, think instead of gold. Gold maybe sort of has a function like tables and mousetraps and instructors. I mean, what's the function of gold? I don't know. It's like to be shiny and to be used to make jewelry. I don't think I own any gold jewelry, but you know, and it's also good for putting into bullion, or I don't know what gold bullion is, but it's a store of value. Anyway, gold has a whole bunch of functions. To be gold, it's not enough to merely perform the functions of gold, whatever those functions happen to be. No, no, no. To be gold, you have to be made of a certain kind of stuff. Namely, you have to be made of atoms with a certain number of protons in the nucleus. I don't know how many protons. I'll look it up when I'm editing this video. But that's what gold is. Gold is an element, and it's got a certain number of protons. If you are not made of the right stuff, then you're not gold. Even if you perform the function of gold, like you make up jewelry and whatever, you've got to be made of the right stuff. Gold is a chemical kind, not a functional kind. One more quick example, cat. Cats are a kind of thing, they're a kind, and do they have a function? I don't know, not really. Maybe like the function of a cat is to be grumpy and to like scratch at your furniture or something like that. But whatever the hell the function of a cat is, that's not what defines cats as cats. What defines a cat as a cat, what makes it that kind of thing, is its biology, its genetics. You need to have a certain genetic makeup to count as a cat, to count as that kind of thing. So a cat is a biological kind, not a functional kind. So now we know what functional kinds are. What's the point of all this? Well, here's the punchline, and I'm going to write it up on the board because it's important, and I'm probably going to have to erase this. The punchline is this: functional kinds are multiply realizable. That's an important sentence. By the end of this lecture video, make sure you understand what that sentence means. So what does it mean? Well, I need to explain what multiple realizability is. This is a point that we've basically already just made, and we've now just given a name to it. But here's the name and here's the definition that we're going to use in this course. A kind is multiply realizable if there are many different physical systems or many different collections of physical stuff that can be of that kind, i.e. that can make it real. Think again of the table, right? You've got the table, it's got legs and it's got a top. There are many different physical systems, there are many different collections of physical stuff that can make up a table, that can make a table real, if you like. That's the realizability bit. You get a collection of wood planks and you arrange them in a certain way and you nail them together for the purpose of making a table, and then you've got a table. That's one way to realize the kind table, is with a bunch of wood planks that you put together. Another way to realize a table is to take like a cardboard moving box. You just moved in somewhere. So you take a box and you put it down in front of the couch. There's your coffee table. Boom, you just did it, right? That's another way to realize the kind table. You just take this other thing, cardboard, a cardboard box, right? That's totally different than the wood planks or whatever that you could make a table out of. And you place it in a certain part of your home and you start putting things on top of it. Now you're using the cardboard box as a table. That is, you're having the cardboard box fulfill a certain function, right? Or a certain role. It's now playing the role of coffee table, and so it is a coffee table. That cardboard box is your coffee table. Here's the cardboard box. I don't know, whatever. And then whatever. Now we know what this sentence, functional kinds are multiply realizable, means. It means that if something is of a functional kind, then there are many different ways, multiple ways, to make one of those things. You can make it out of all sorts of different stuff. All that matters for being of that kind is that you play the role or fulfill the function or whatever. Okay, I think we basically get this point. Just sort of to put the final, bit on it, think again of some of the functional kinds, like a cat. Cats, the kind cat, is not multiply realizable. Typically, non-functional kinds are not multiply realizable. Say you've got some other thing, like a little robot that you made, and it fulfills the function of your cat, right? It scratches at your furniture, and it comes over and cuddles with you while you're watching television or whatever. I don't know, whatever your cat's job is. And it excretes waste into the litter box, I guess, and eats cat food sometimes, but it's a robot. Is it a cat? No. No, it's not a cat. In order to be a cat, you have to have a certain kind of genetics. So the kind cat is not multiply realizable. There aren't different ways to make a cat. The only way to make a cat is with certain genetic material and some fur and some muscles and flesh or whatever. That's the only stuff you can use to make a cat. Whereas there's all sorts of stuff that you can use to make a table. So Putnam, and by extension Bradley, because Bradley's the one that we read, uses this concept, or this idea, the notion of multiple realizability, to show that the identity theory of mind is false. That's how all this fits together, right? Is that multiple realizability is the thing that's going to go here, in this box, as an objection to the identity theory. And here's how Putnam is going to do that. He's going to make the following point. Mental states are multiply realizable. Okay, so to see how this works and why it's relevant, imagine an alternative to the identity theory, right? The identity theory says that the mind and the brain are identical. For a moment, consider the wood table identity theory. The wood table identity theory, I'm making it up, is the theory that says that, to be a table just is to be some wood arranged in a certain way. Wood arranged in a certain way and tables are identical. It's the same kind of thing. That's not going to work. We can disprove that theory because table, the kind of thing table, is multiply realizable. You can make a table out of metal instead of wood. So it's just not true to say that tables are identical with wood arranged in a certain way, because you can have something that's not wood arranged in a certain way. You can have metal or a cardboard box or whatever, and it be a table. And we can make the same kind of argument against the mind-brain identity theory, right? We can point out that minds, or mental states, are multiply realizable. There's different ways to make a mind other than with brains. If it were possible to make minds with something other than human brains, if mental states are multiply realizable, then no identity theory of the mind is ever going to work, because mental states would be a functional kind of thing. Here on page 6 of the reading is a sentence that begins to put this point very clearly. For the identity theorist, things with minds have to be made out of the right kind of stuff, brain stuff, neurons. Right? That's the point of the identity theory. Minds are brains. But if it turns out that minds are multiply realizable, there's different kinds of stuff that you can make a mind out of, well then the identity theory is just going to be wrong. Okay, but is this even true? Is it true that mental states are multiply realizable, that you can make a mind out of different kinds of stuff and it doesn't matter what stuff you make it out of? Is that even true? The argument that we get from the reading for today is yes, and the argument centers around octopuses. Here's the important thing about an octopus. An octopus has totally different internal brain stuff than we do, right? The octopus's brain, an octopus is a weird creature. The octopus's brain doesn't look anything like our brain. It doesn't have any of the same kinds of neurons. It doesn't have any of the same kinds of stuff in there. So in the human brain, it might be that pain is brain state B. But the octopus brain is so different. An octopus brain is made out of different stuff. It can't get into brain state B. It's made out of different stuff. It can't be arranged in the same way. An octopus brain can only get into brain state O. Whatever brain state O is. We're just making up these labels, of course. Here's the thing. If the identity theorist is right, and pain is just identical with brain state B, Then octopuses, because they can never be in brain state B because they have totally different brains, they can never feel pain. That just follows from the identity theory. But octopuses obviously can feel pain. Octopuses are complex organisms with brains and nervous systems and all sorts of stuff. And if you cut off their tentacle, then they wither away. They very much seem like they're in pain. Here's how this point is put in the reading on page 7. This is Putnam's multiple realizability argument against the mind-brain identity theorist. Because mental states, such as pain, are multiply realizable, any view which identifies mental states with some particular physical state must be false. I hope that makes sense at this point, right? The identity theory says that being in pain just is identical with some specific state of a physical thing, namely a human brain. But that can't be right because pain and other mental states can be realized in multiple ways. Some of those ways, of course, involve human brains, but other ways don't. And so the identity theory is just wrong. Anyway, that's the argument. So now we've got the multiple realizability argument against the identity theory. The next thing that we get in this reading, and it follows very naturally from that, is the statement of functionalism. Functionalism is the third version of physicalism that we're going to talk about in this course. Indeed, there really only are 3 major versions of physicalism out there, and functionalism is the third and last one. Okay, so like I said, functionalism is Putnam's theory, and we're just reading Bradley, who summarizes that theory very clearly. So let's just sort of write up a definition for what functionalism is. Okay, so this is the definition of functionalism that we're going to use in this course. Functionalism is the theory that what it is to be in a particular mental state is to be in a functional state, which can be specified in terms of inputs and outputs, or causes and effects. Okay, so what's going on with all this inputs and outputs stuff? Where did that come from? Inputs and outputs, or we'll see causes and effects, which are a certain type of input and output, whatever. Inputs and outputs are the way that we're understanding the notion of a function. So to illustrate this, let's just add one more example of a functional kind. We didn't talk about this earlier. Maybe I should have used this earlier because it's a really good example. But here's a functional kind of thing, a vending machine. A vending machine is a functional kind of thing. To be a vending machine, all you have to do is vend. You have to play the role of giving me potato chips when I put money inside of you. If you can perform that function, then you're a vending machine. It doesn't matter what you make a vending machine out of. You can make it out of plastic, or metal, or wood, or Play-Doh, or whatever. I mean, it would be hard to make a vending machine out of Play-Doh, but if you were able to do it, if you were able to make a machine that took in money and spat out potato chips and crackers and soft drinks or whatever, if your Play-Doh machine did that, if it played that role, if it had that function, then it's a vending machine. So a vending machine is a functional kind of thing, and we specify what its function is in terms of the inputs and the outputs. The inputs of a vending machine are cash, or like credit cards, you swipe your credit card or whatever, right? There's some inputs, and then there's some outputs, and the outputs are like bags of potato chips. I don't know how to draw a bag of potato chips. That's how we specify the role of a vending machine. In the reading, we get a similar example involving an adding machine. An adding machine is a machine that takes certain numbers as inputs and gives you other numbers as outputs. And as long as it does that job properly, it's an adding machine. It doesn't matter what it's made of. Here's where this is explained. It's on page 9. What is it for something to be an adding machine? An adding machine is anything which takes 2 numbers as input and gives the arithmetic sum as an output. For example, which takes the numbers 2 and 3 as input and generates the number 5 as output. So we can specify functions or jobs or roles of things in terms of their inputs and outputs. And when it comes to mental states, at least in the version of functionalism that Putnam developed, I think he did this back in the 70s or maybe 80s, the inputs of mental states are causes. What causes those mental states? And the outputs are effects. We get a few examples to illustrate this in the reading. I think the reading included an example of having a visual experience of the color red. That was one example of a mental state specified in terms of its causes and effects. And another one is believing something, like believing that snow is white. And Bradley goes through examples of the causes and effects. Let's just make up one now. We're going to make up an example of a mental state that someone can be in and specify the inputs and outputs, or the causes and the effects, and that'll sort of illustrate what functionalism is all about. Let's go with jealousy. Jealousy is a possible state of a person's mind. That's something about your mind if you're jealous. If we're going to specify the role or the function of jealousy in terms of causes and effects, we need to specify what those causes and effects are. So like, what's something that causes like a jealous episode, right? That's an event in the mind. Well, it's like seeing a photo of your ex on social media. Okay, there, I've drawn a photo of them at the beach in their bathing suits, having a good time. And in combination with seeing the photo, you have some memory in your mind. And it's like a memory of what you used to have or whatever. I don't know how to draw the memory, but I'll just say memory. So you see the photo, you have the memory, those go in, those are the inputs, those are the causes. And then what are the effects? What comes out? Well, there's the whimpering. You whimper and you say stuff like, "Nah, I'm cool. Don't worry about me, I'm fine." There it is. We've got our causes and our effects. The idea of functionalism is that anything that fits in here, anything that takes these causes as inputs and spits out these effects as outputs, anything that functions in here, that's jealousy. So if an octopus or an alien or a robot or whatever with a totally different brain made out of totally different stuff, right, can see a photo and have some memories, and that causes whimpering and saying I'm fine or whatever, if it can do that, if it can take these things as inputs and spit these things out as outputs, well then that thing is jealous. It doesn't matter what that thing is made of. Just like a vending machine. Any machine that takes the money in and gives the potato chips out is a vending machine. So we're basically done, right? What we've done today is we got an objection, the multiple realizability objection to the identity theory, and then we got a presentation of functionalism, this next physicalist version of a theory of mind. Here is functionalism in slogan form. I'm not going to write this up, but maybe I'll add the text in editing when I edit this thing later. But here's the point. Functionalism says, if you can do the job, then you are the mental state. It's the job or the function or the role that matters. It doesn't matter what you put in here. You can put in here brain state X in human brains made out of human neurons or whatever, or you can put brain state G in there in the brains of gorillas or octopuses or bats or robots or aliens or whatever. It doesn't matter what goes in here as long as it can do the job of taking this stuff and turning it into this stuff. If you can do the job, then you are the mental state. That's functionalism.